Hello and welcome to AXSchat. We're delighted to be joined today by David Constantine from Motivation. Antonio's stuck in midair, I think, right now, as traveling back from Vienna. So there's only three of us instead of four, but still great to have you with us, David. So you've become highly recommended, and you run an organisation called Motivation, and you have a background from Royal College of Art. I'm a really big fan of Royal College of Art. We've had the director of Helen Hamlin Centre on previously. I think they do amazing work.
Jeremy.
Around. So it wasn't Jeremy. I know Jeremy, but his successor, Rama.
Oh, very well.
So yeah, massive fan of RCA and Helen Hammond. So you're going to be good. But please tell us about Motivation and your personal background and how you came to start designing mobility solutions and so on.
Okay. Well, I started off actually at IBM post college. So I ended up on a degree course for computing at Oxford Polytechnic, now Oxford Brookes, in the 80s, after having had a spinal cord injury in 82 in Australia. Prior to that, I was a farming agricultural student, so quite different worlds. Computing was the least of my interests in the whole world, but it was then I realized that it was something I could actually do. I could communicate. There were very basic computers of those days, 82 obviously. And then I ended up taking a degree in computing. I then ended up being with my course by getting a job at IBM laboratories in Winchester, and they were an amazing company to work for, mid-80s this is. Couldn't do enough for me as a graduate, but unfortunately it wasn't quite the role for me. I didn't want to be a junior programmer or even a senior programmer or anything to do with that, I realized quite quickly. And I realized that actually I'd chosen a career which, despite it being something I could do in terms of, the accessibility of it and, and as a job, and that's what I did my degree in, it just wasn't satisfying me. And so I spent a month or two in different departments where when you were a graduate, you were allowed to move around the company to get a exposure to what other departments did. And I chose to go to the photography department because I'm a keen photographer. That wasn't accessible. So they put me in the design department. And it was there that I met these guys who were sort of busily drawing things in CAD in these three computers while I was doing some of the stuff with the graphics guys. And one lunchtime I said to them, "So what do you guys do?" And they said, "Oh, we're product designers, industrial designers." And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Well, we design them with the hardware of the machines that you're writing the software for that's going to go in the architecture of the electronics guys." And I went, "Oh, so you're the guys that make these machines really hard for me to use because I've got no grip on my hands." And so I just went home that night and I thought, that is what I've got to do. It was like an epiphany. And so I rang up my old college and I said to the student services, and I said, "Could you send me all the master's courses in industrial design in the whole country?" And so they sent me this photocopied list, and on it was the Royal College of Art. All my friends had moved to London from Oxford, so I thought, well, London's the obvious place to go, not realizing quite what applying to the Royal College of Art really meant, if I'm honest. But I did find on that prospectus a computer-related design course, and I applied for it, went for an interview, realized I had absolutely no chance of getting on it when they told me there were only 3 places on the whole course. And I just thought, well, this is just been a nice day out from work. And I didn't tell IBM anything about this because you just didn't do that. If you told IBM that you were thinking of leaving, you'd be dropped like a hot brick because they make a huge commitment to you financially for the rest of your life, basically, because it was a job for life. So I ended up getting a place. I ended up at the Royal College. I felt like the luckiest person alive. And in our first year, we were mixed in with all the industrial design design managers, industrial design engineers, and we all did lots of joint projects together. And in our first year and the second term, we arrived at college one day as a piece of paper on all our desks saying, the next 3 weeks you'll be designing a wheelchair for developing countries. 3-week project, it's a competition, there's prize money, you all have to do it, and no criteria, no brief, no nothing. Set your own brief, find out much about it. This is before Google, obviously. And one of the guys in the course, who was an industrial product design student, came up to me and said, look, you know a bit about wheelchairs, obviously. I've traveled around Asia and Africa a bit and know what workshops can do. How about we team up? So I said, yeah, sure. And that's what we did. So it was Simon Gue. And so he and I teamed up. We ended up winning the prize 3 weeks later. And we got taken for lunch in the senior common room, which was very nice, by the judges and the head of the college. And they said to us, you know, you really shouldn't forget this. And it was an idea that Lord Snowdon had brought to the college. And he was there as a judge. The head of the college just said, you know, you really should do something with this. This is really important. Don't just leave it in your portfolios and stuff. And we didn't really think much of it. It wasn't our major project. It was just a 3-week exercise. We'd done plenty of them in the first 2 terms. And so we went, oh, okay. And then promptly forgot about it for a month or 2. But near the end of the summer term, in our first year of a 2-year master's, Simon and I got chatting and we thought, maybe we should go off and do a trip and research that thing and get a bit of a trip over Christmas somewhere. You know? So that's what we did. We went to the head of the college, said, how about we go off to India and have a couple of weeks off college? Is that all right? And he said, yes. How much money do you need?
Wow.
And we hadn't even asked him for any money, and we just made up a figure on the spot. And I had kept in touch with a guy called Richard Frost, who I'd met at Oxford Poly on the accounting side of my degree. And he was living above me in a flat in Clapham in London when I was a student. And he came out of the tube one night, and I was sitting on the Clapham Common in the sunshine, just thinking how brilliant I'm going to go to India, which I'd always wanted to go to. And he came out, and I said, you know, guess what? We've just been offered this trip to India. Do you want to come with me and help out? Because I need an assistant to sort of travel with, or I need an assistant all the time. And he said, yeah. And he'd already been to India, so I knew he wouldn't sort of freak out when we got there. So off went the 3 of us in December '89, and we went to a centre called the Rehabilitation of the Paralysed, which had been started by a British VSO lady called Valerie Taylor. We built a wheelchair in a week there. It was our first visit. And at the end of the week, she came up to us and said, you know, guys, you've done a really great job here. You know, we could really do with your help. Would you come back here and build these for us for a few months? And we were literally about to leave the centre and, you know, go to the airport. And we sort of looked at each other and went, well, when we finish college, why not? Now, Rich already had a good job at what is now PwC, then Coops and Lybrand. He was on a very sort of good graduate, you know, scheme to pass him through to be a partner in not that many years. We were about to come out of college, and that's basically what happened. And so we went off and we went around the rest of India and Bangladesh. We had Christmas in Goa, and we came back and we presented to the college what we'd done. And we thought, well, this could be something. And that's sort of really where it started. So it was a student project that we took into the real world, basically. And so we set up Motivation. In fact, we weren't really Motivation. We called ourselves Motivation because the first grant application we applied for in the US was from Ronald McDonald's children's charities. And the first question on the form was name of organization, and we didn't have a name. So we came up with a project name that Simon had used before called Motivation, not realizing, I think, really 26 years later, that it's a name that we've grown into brilliantly, because it is, you know, we got a lot of stick from people saying, oh, you should be called Wheelchairs for the World or something like that. And it's not really about that. It's not just about wheelchairs. That's what people know us for. and that's the tangible, visible bit you can see. But there's a whole lot more to providing someone within, getting someone to be included in society. A wheelchair is just a part of that. So essentially, we design and provide low-cost wheelchairs in less resource settings, low-income countries, whatever you want to call them. And we set up projects, we work with local partners, we design the products, and now we ship from a central manufacturing source, whereas before, for the first 10 or 12 years, we were setting up small workshops on invitation from different countries all over the world. So we sort of cut our teeth and built our staff knowledge up. And then we realized that the difficult bit was actually not providing the chairs. The difficult bit was making sure the quality was retained once we left the workshop that we'd set up or refurbished. And it didn't actually matter where it was made as long as it was repairable locally. And so our programs are about local sustainability rather than where the products are made. So now they're made centrally, we can ship them in containers and then focus more on the training of the service and the user rather than all the focus going in on the actual design and production. So we design and change things more centrally now. So essentially that's what we do.
And I'm really interested in the fact that there's a lot of infrastructure problems in some of the places that you're working in.
Yeah.
So the chairs have to be a lot more robust.
Yeah. So we learned that pretty fast in Bangladesh. I mean, we started off very much sort of working with whatever we found available in markets. For example, in Bangladesh, you could only get 28-inch wheels that were for rickshaws, that were Chinese. But that was all that was available. You couldn't get a 26 or a 24-inch wheel like a normal wheelchair. So if you design a chair or take a chair out with a 24-inch wheel, as soon as a tire goes, forget about it. Just bin it, the whole chair. So people go to great lengths to donate chairs, gather them all up from NHS hospitals, spend all this time and money shipping them out there. Then the centre spends all the time and money paying backsheesh to the customs guys to get it out of customs, and then within no time at all. And that's if they even fit the people they're given to and they're appropriate, which is unlikely. So that model really doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And so we found out pretty fast and sort of knew, it's fairly obvious, people live in very rural areas, that you need to use the materials that are locally available for the repair and replacement side of things, rather than just the fact that it has to be made locally. It doesn't. And there is a shift now towards more local things, but with the way the world has changed with additive manufacturing and new, more localized manufacturing methods, there's some really exciting stuff happening, which I can come on to in a bit. But yeah, so every place we went to, the users there were facing different sort of infrastructure issues of the environment. So in Bangladesh and places like Cambodia, huge numbers of the population were living not only in cities, but big numbers in rural areas where wheelchairs are really tough to get over. So we've designed a 3-wheel version for rough terrain. And that's our sort of signature chair, if you like. That's what people recognize as a motivation chair. But then, we worked in Poland and Romania in the early 90s, just after the wall had come down. And, there they wouldn't even counter a 3-wheel chair. Why would we want that? We live in built-up environments with potholes, and, we live upstairs, and we want chairs that we can take the wheels off, fold the backrest down, and put it in our car. So people live very different lives in different places around the world, and so you need to design things that are relevant for those settings, if you like, or provide things that as well for those settings.
So David, what's next? I mean, I know that and I also wonder how are these wheelchairs funded? Because a lot of people that need them don't have access for the money. So I'm just curious about how you get funding, especially in the developing countries, but also how is all of the technology changes that are happening all over the world, how is that impacting what you're doing?
A lot. Is the answer. Just go back to the beginning. What we used to do was we'd raise money for a project. We'd all go out,
Right.
3 or 4 of us, set up a project which might be refurbishing a workshop that already existed, starting a new one from scratch, design the product range, might be 2 or 3 chairs, depending on what the needs were. So, for example, in Bangladesh, we were working mainly with spinal cord injury. Then in Poland, similar. Cambodia, 3rd project, amputees, double above knee amputees from landmines, plus other disabilities that come into the. Then mid-90s, we were asked to go to Russia and Eastern Europe to look at kids with cerebral palsy. So we got into the world of seating for children with high-level seating needs, a whole other world from the kind of seating I need, an amputee needs, someone with polio needs, for example. So this is where we've already cut our teeth in the early years, both on the technical side, but also on the clinical side. So we started taking on therapists who knew how to, seat people and train that at a basic level. Then we would raise the money to go and do that project. And in that fund-raised money, there would be a sort of capital amount for, say, 150 wheelchairs. Now, the capacity we set up might be 300 for a year. So we might pay for half a year's chairs to be made up front that they could then provide locally because they were low cost, either through the centre would be paying for them or raising the money locally. And this is the important thing about working with a local partner, that they are dealing with that family who need the wheelchair. And the family might be an extended family who can sort of, depending on the culture of that country, quite a lot of people will try and rally around and, spend the money for the family member who needs it. Some families really can't. And so a lot of the centres we worked with had a sort of means testing system and a social worker. And we would leave that to them because, we couldn't tell one family from another in Bangladesh, say, how well off they were. We just can't judge that from our background at all, from where we're all from. And so we left that to the local partners. So either the local partner would fundraise and subsidise it, or they would get the family to contribute up to a certain point, or they'd get them to pay for it all. Now the model is that we can pack them in containers, and other NGOs that we train, we won't sell them unless they're trained organisations, buy containers from us and then hand them out free. So, for example, the International Committee of the Red Cross in Geneva, like our wheelchairs, we've trained their staff. We developed special training for them 10 years ago, and all their expat staff can now train local partner staff in how to seat people properly and set up services. And we know that they run a quality system because they do it with their amputees and prosthetics and orthotics, but they don't want to get into wheelchairs. So they use our wheelchairs, and the income then from the cost of putting those chairs in a container and shipping them to wherever they want them from Shanghai, they pay us for that. So now we've changed our model, but the designs they have in these containers that are mixed 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers, sports chairs, are all based around the knowledge we built up in the first 10 or 12 years, knowing what was an average size wheel in most countries, what was the most popular bearing, what kind of steel should we use, because we learnt throughout those first 10, 12 years, and we still have staff who know all that stuff. And so there's different models of how things get funded. But generally, but not always. See, when we're working with a local partner, so like a disability organisation in, say, India, in Bangalore, we will encourage them to get reimbursement from the individual, the family, for them to fundraise, to run their system, so they can then get more wheelchairs, so they're self-sustaining. Where it's an international NGO, they will raise the money themselves, buy the chairs from us, and then give them away free, and that's usually in their mandate. So ICRC are mandated to give free products, not charge for them.
Cool.
And so that it works in different ways depending on who the partner is.
You mentioned earlier about additive manufacturing. This is, we're all quite geeky and very interested in the prospect that sort of 3D printing can mean for making spare parts and assistive devices more locally, and also ensuring quality control, because essentially, so long as you can send the data through to publish the blueprint, you should get some kind of consistency. So you said you're already looking into this?
Yeah, well, what we started with, what we didn't do is set out to print 3D wheelchairs. But 3 or 4 years ago, one of our design team has worked for us almost right since the beginning, and another one has been away for about 10 years and come back, and he worked for us almost since the beginning as well. He was at Royal College with us, and we started focusing some years ago on bespoke adaptations to any chair, so not only our own chairs. And we started developing this thing called a postural support device kit. So people need different things. When someone's been sitting in a really bad wheelchair for their teenage or childhood, and they've developed into a bad postural shape, if you like, they might need like a support here, lateral support, or a headrest or something added to the general chair that they might get that's not a motivation chair or one of our own chairs. And so we created this kit of parts which have a massive range of bits of all these different things, and we have a sort of manual that you can use to sort of teach you how to put them all together and so on. So there's brackets, there's bits of foam, and you can adapt things. And then we thought, well, actually, with 3D printing, let's experiment to see. And of course, all that's drawn up on CAD, all those parts. And they're a physical thing that gets made in China, and then we ship it out to a project along with our wheelchairs. So it's like an additional thing to really fit something really bespoke for somebody at the service we've shown. And we basically thought, well, we can print these things, and what if we send a shipping container out with a printer in it and an assessment bed and a measuring assessment box, and the service can then have a little service in a box, and then when someone needs a certain shape, say hip or lateral support or a certain shape headrest, they could print it out. 4 or 5 years ago, this seemed pretty far-fetched. Today, it's working. The printers we bought, we got a Google grant to try and experiment and do the R&D on this, because that is something as a non-profit we've really struggled with. Is for years we struggled with funding our unrestricted funds, which run the organisation. But the other difficult bit was funding a design team and design time. So when we got project funds to go out to, say, Indonesia and run a project, or Cambodia, the designers were on the ground in the field. So they would design the product there. And now we have a different model where we're designing more in the UK, and with the knowledge we've built up and testing stuff overseas, and then having them made in the factory and then shipping them, that's harder because you've got to fund someone's, a team's salary and so on. And the kind of NGO program funds we get don't pay for that kind of stuff. So it's been really hard to get design money, because we're a bit of a quirky NGO, if you like. We don't really fit the sort of your general run-of-the-mill household name NGOs that work overseas. We're like a little non-profit design agency, and NGO funding and trusts don't really sort of get that. But for example, Helen Hamlin has been extremely generous to us in realizing that actually we need money to design these products, to actually do humanitarian programs, to get them out into the field. DFID might pay for the getting them out in the field bit,
but not the design, right?
Because they don't get that bit. Well, they do now, because that's all changing, and it's really, really exciting. So this interview is a really interesting time to have it, because if we'd had it a year ago, I would be talking quite differently about how things are. And we've been doing this Google grant, and we worked out actually that this could work, this model. It does work. We sent a container to Bangalore, we've trialed it and we've tested it, and we've got stuff successfully being printed out from CAD models that downloaded, and it can be done locally bespoke on the spot. So if you get somebody who needs a slightly longer one, with the kit it was great. You could have a short and a medium and long, but once you've used those, you have to order some more from China. With a 3D printer, you just print out another one. If it doesn't quite fit, you just print out another one. And the whole thing about the service is really important. People travel for days to get to these services, and you're unlikely to see them again because the families really struggled to pay for the money to get them there. The child with CP or something, it's a real difficult traveling on the buses and so on. So you've got to sort of sort them out there and then. You can't do like the NHS does, where they say, "Oh, come back in 6 weeks when your part's ordered, and then we'll fit it," and it's not quite right. So we'll come back in another 4 weeks, and then we'll fit it again. You need to sort of must do it because the restrictions of working in a developing country are sort of different and greater in many ways. And so having this flexibility of using additive manufacturing to do that, and now we're looking at, well, what else can we do? What else could we do locally? We know this model works. And what's changing is that the price of printers, the printers we bought 2 or 3 years ago have dropped tenfold, into the hundreds rather than the thousands, and in as good, if not better quality. It's incredible. And so the really interesting thing that's changed in our sector now is that people are waking up, funders are waking up to the fact that actually there's a whole section of disability in developing countries that they've all been talking about rights and advocacy for years and years and years. And we've been going, yeah, but if you have a mobility disability, or you have a hearing impairment, or you need some assistive technology, who's going to pay for that? Who's going to get an appropriate piece of equipment for you? What about glasses? What about walking sticks and frames and all that stuff? And no one wanted to pay for that stuff because it's 10 or 15 years ago, it was all about rights and advocacy. Well, yes, it was, but unless you get out the door and out of bed, you're not going anywhere to demand your rights as a disabled person in your society. And we've banged on about this for years and years and years, and finally it feels like someone's woken up and listened, because things are changing, and that DFID have realised, they're holding this big summit on the 24th of July, and they sort of got timed in with the World Health Organization, have created a list of, they created the GATE movement, which is the global assistive technology movement, and it's created a list of 50 essential assistive devices, a bit like the essential drugs list that the WHO recommends to countries. So this has been created over the last 2 or 3 years. And now there's DFID and USA all saying, okay, well, there's a whole section of the disability field, population, if you like, that if we're really going to follow the SDGs and leave no one behind by 2030, we need to be addressing that. And so, if I didn't have a wheelchair, I'd be lying in bed talking to you. I wouldn't be going out later. Absolutely. And you come and tell me about my human rights and my disability rights till the cows come home, but it doesn't really help me unless I have a product to get out there and demand my place in society. And so it's a really interesting time, because DFID are now looking, and USA are now looking at the sort of design and development of this range of products that, and it sort of feels like we're sort of, what we've been doing has been the right thing to do. We've always believed in it, but other people are realizing it now, and it's great. It's really very exciting. So on the 24th of July, the DFID are going to be making some big announcements, and Penny Mordaunt's going to stand up. We don't quite know what they're going to say yet, but it's basically done in 4 themes, and one of the themes is assistive technology and innovation.
So for our international audience, because we have people from all over the world, DFID is our Department for International Development in the UK, and Penny Mordaunt is the former Minister for Disabled People, who moved and obviously enjoyed her previous job so much that she's essentially decided and made the proclamation that any UK overseas aid is to be linked
Yeah.
to include an element of inclusion for people with disabilities. So that's a massive sea change.
Yes.
It's gratifying to see that the ministers have taken their role so seriously that they've understood it, they've understood the brief, and they've understood that it goes wider than one ministry, and they've understood that this is an international effort and that we can through our aid programs make a difference. So I have to give Penny Mordaunt applaud for the work that she's done and her vision on this. I do think we are at the cusp of a real change in the way that we are.
I do as well.
Enabling products and services to people. Yes, the rights are important, but without the enabling products and services, you're right, we don't get to advocate for those rights. Or the theory of them is great, but we don't have the practical. We don't enjoy them practically.
Right.
So we're at the end of our half hour.
All right.
Do you have a final point? Yes.
I've just started I'm not very loud or active on Twitter, but I have just started a campaign this week. I worked out that if I counted back 50 weekdays from the 24th of July, it was May the 14th. And so every day for the next 6 weeks, weekdays, Monday to Friday, I'm going to do a tweet, which is under the hashtag, which I came up with, AT changed my life. So assistive technology changed my life. And I'm just featuring each of the assistive devices that I use. And when I run out of them, I'll start talking about things I think are good design leading up to the 24th of July. So I started it on Monday. So I started obviously with a tweet about my wheelchair, because that's number one. The next day was my cushion, because that's seriously number two, because without that, I'd have a pressure sore. And so on and so on. So I've started that little campaign. So I've done 5 now. One should have gone out today, I hope, on TweetDeck. So I'll be doing that over the next 6 weeks, which is why I wanted to time this interview. It was perfect timing, really, with the beginning of that. I don't have many followers, so, but I just...
You will after AXSchat, though.
So that I just wanted to highlight that, because that would be something to lead up until the 24th of July. So I've got about 30 of the products I use that are, important. Like, obviously my phone's one. It's an assistive device, really, because it's not all about the high-tech stuff either. It's it's low-tech and high-tech.
Absolutely, and sometimes everyday tech is assistive.
Yeah,
So for me, I'm
dyslexic.
Yeah, so for me, I'm dyslexic. Actually, I have organizational problems. Outlook is one of my biggest assistive technologies, because it helps me stay on top of stuff that I wouldn't be able to organize on pen and paper.
Yeah.
So it's been fascinating. I think we're going to have a great Twitter chat on Tuesday.
Right.
I need to thank our supporters, Barclays, for helping us, with the captioning and helping keep AXSchat up and running. Thank you very much, David. It's been great chatting with you.
Great.
Yes. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Excellent work.
So,
Excellent work.
do I need to stay online now to